back. Another episode of Form Voltron. Brian, I was just talking to you before we started. In a few weeks, we're coming up on a year of this. A year. Wow. So we got some things planned. We've been talking about some things we can do. Next phase we want to take this into. So we'll get more into that at another episode. But anyway, and again, thanks to everybody who's been listening in the last year. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Today, this guest is a little unique. What we're gonna do today. The other guests that we've had, whenever a guest was suggested to us, it was always, and we have taken on suggestions, it was always a guest that was kind of already part of a network, I guess you could say. For example, a previous guest may have suggested them, or they were friends with them, or maybe they were part of an organization or some type of activist type movement that a previous guest was on. But today's guest was completely independent of any of that. This person today has a very, I think, unique and story that you guys need to hear. And was, because we often talk about, we talk about all these topics, but sometimes, I'm guilty of it too. I'm just complaining and pointing out all these problems, but I don't really have solutions. And, today we can talk about like what happens if you get in a situation like this. And, there are people in the audience, friends of mine, friends of his, that insisted for a few months that we have him on. And we're finally doing this today. I've probably talked with him more than any other guest leading up to this. And this has been a few months in the making. Again, there's people in the audience that have been looking for this, waiting for this episode. So Mike is here. We're just going to go with Mike. And Mike, you're already kind of a celebrity to some of the people in the audience.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
well,
So Mike, thanks for being here today. We appreciate it. We're going to be, you and me already talked, we're going to be kind of vague about some of the things. But before we get into any of this, is there anything you want us to know about you? Or you don't have to say anything about yourself, but anything like before we get into this, your story and start talking politics and stuff, anything you want the audience to know?
I'd like to preface the whole interview by saying, first of all, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And chatting with you is a real delight.
Thank you.
It sounds a little soft, but I think it's great. I always enjoy our conversations.
Awesome.
They have a lot of pulp to it, as I like to describe it.
Thanks.
It's not just like watered down orange juice.
Right. Thank you.
So, but I'd also like to add that your show talks about a lot of human behavior and human interaction.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, and it's really difficult to understand how people behave in certain situations.
Right.
But I'd also like to add that everything during this interview, this time here, comes out of no intentions of any malice or anything like that.
Right.
I have no regrets. I would do it all over again in a heartbeat.
Okay.
And it was quite the opportunity for me to be in the place that I lived.
Yeah.
And if I didn't live there, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Right.
So, and all the people in that area that I moved from I met a lot of really fantastic people.
Nice.
That I still speak with upon occasion. And you really learn who your friends are very quickly when you go through some toils and snares.
Yeah, Mike, like I told you, I think a lot of us went through that during the time period we're about to talk about. So you're not alone. And a lot of this is a reflection on human behavior, and human behavior can be scary. I found out, I learned a lot of those lessons too myself. So Mike, what we'll say is this, let's start off. Like I said, I want to talk to you about a lot of stuff, but before we start, one other thing I want to say. I've actually, ironically, every time we get talking, we ended up talking about, like I said, politics and social issues, human behavior. And the people who brought me to you told me large chunks of your story. But I'm realizing today, I don't know if I've ever actually heard the whole thing in order, beginning, middle, and end. So I want to get that all out today, because there's still parts of it that I'm I must admit I'm kind of in the dark about. So I'm with the audience today. I'm learning about this too. We just get so sidetracked in a good way whenever we've talked leading up to this. So Mike, so I'll say this. So again, I'll set the stage. You worked for a delivery. You used to work for a delivery service. We'll say that. We'll put it that way. And you and me talk. We'll say kind of a vacation destination, resort type destination in New England. We're going to be vague again because you did make a lot of friends and there were a lot of people you cared about and had a rapport with. And we're not trying to throw anyone under the bus. That's why we're being
Absolutely.
that's why we're being vague, just so the people at home know. So what ended up happening, it revolved around the coronavirus, another just fantastic coronavirus kind of story. So that's kind of the lead in. So bring me to that point. Here you are, you're working for this company. You, up until this point, you had a really, good relationship with these people. But then things kind of, in this particular town, things got a little weird. Take us through the story, and I'll just kind of, if I have questions, I'll interject.
Okay. So a lot of these people
Yeah.
that through this delivery company that I worked with, I like to use with as opposed to for, um, they were more than just customers. These were friends, these were family that I would see obviously on a daily basis, but also I hung out with them. I went out to dinner with them. Um, I saw their kids grow up,
Right.
spent Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's with these friends and extended family, if you
Right.
will.
Right.
And also in this particular community, I did a lot of behind the scenes philanthropic work for people that were struggling. One thing in living and working in a small community, you really have your finger on the pulse of what's going on, not the
Mhm.
gossip, but the real,
Right.
the real meat and potatoes of who's struggling, who's going
Right.
through some difficulties in their life.
Right.
So I wanted to say that
Yeah.
that I did a lot of work behind the scenes, and I'm
Right.
not patting myself on the
Right.
back. I did
Right.
it because I feel that there are more people that need to do it,
Right.
and also you never really know when somebody is at that tipping point, that
Right.
standing at the edge of the cliff, if you will, where the next thing is going to set them off,
Right.
or
Right.
they might do something that they regret, or to other people.
Right.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead. What was
Oh, no, no. I
what
was
was the
just saying,
question?
so just setting up the story, you had a really good
Right.
rapport with these people,
Correct.
right? And
That's
Mike,
correct.
I would add too, I hate to stereotype, but again, it's a vacation type spot. I think a lot of people would stereotype. It's interesting you got in deep and saw these people's problems because I think it's an area where we associate with a lot of kind of like, I don't know, like, I don't know if you want to say party atmosphere, but when you think of vacation area, you kind of forget that people do have problems in these areas. I hate to stereotype that way. That's cool that you saw that other side of it, that it's not all like rainbows in this desirable area where people like to go vacation.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the people who live out there year round they they're not always that affluent.
Right.
They struggle just like everybody
Right.
else. They
Right.
work two or three jobs,
Right.
and it's a real challenge.
Yeah.
And I think recognizing that is really important.
Right. Right. Right.
So
Yeah. So here you are. You have this report. You get along. Up until then, there was really no problems, but then the coronavirus comes along, and this is kind of
uh,
where your troubles, the friction starts. So take us into that now. I think the way you put it to me, you started like things started changing a little bit, maybe in people's attitudes and what started happening as this all took place. So just also, Mike, before you start, reminding people again, you're working for a delivery place, so it's like you're not one of these people you're out in this interacting with people while they kind of got their doors shut and they're scared or whatever it is they're seeing on the news. And here you come along and thinking, well, I'm cool with these people. There should be no problem. But what started happening? Give us some examples.
so if I pause for a while, it's not
Okay.
because the video is frozen. I just want to articulate very carefully
Okay.
what I want to say. So
Take your time. It's no problem.
part of it was that I will admit, initially, through the media,
Yeah.
things were blown out of proportion.
Right.
Um, you know, I admit that I was cleaning up, and I try to, obviously we're handling a lot
Yeah.
of um, items and door handles and stuff like that. So keeping clean and uh, wearing certain protection, if you want to call it
Yeah.
face coverings.
Yeah.
And I participated in that
Right.
initially. I
Right.
fully agree with that,
Right.
100%. Um, so I would have, I'm not saying that I had the most um, seniority, if you will, where I worked,
Yeah.
but um, people gravitated to me because I
Right.
would get things accomplished
Right.
very quickly.
Right.
Because I don't like to mess around and play games. So if somebody needs something,
Yeah.
they would come to me for that,
Right.
and I'd try to resolve it.
Right.
Um, so I would get phone calls. This is during the coronavirus.
Yeah.
I would get phone calls late at night. We were working extremely long hours.
Yeah.
I would get phone calls late at night that some customers were missing um, items for
Okay.
their business that
Yeah.
they would have to, because they were scared,
Yeah.
they wanted these items brought to their residential address
Yeah.
so then they could work from there.
Right.
And um, full disclosure, I would track these packages down,
Right.
put them in my personal vehicle,
Right.
and made sure all the paperwork was clean,
Right.
and I would bring them to their house. I
Right.
would be out in my personal
Right.
vehicle delivering these items
Right.
until midnight.
Right.
These people would call me up crying
Yeah. You're
because they
doing a
were
lot of
freaking out.
charity for these people. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Right.
And after, I don't want to say after the dust settled, but
Yeah.
after people started coming out and certain areas were opening up, if you will,
Yeah.
um, some of the attitude changed
Okay.
because it's not, I can't just pinpoint it as to one thing why it
Okay.
changed,
Okay.
but I think a lot of people were frustrated because I was working a lot of hours
Okay.
and being compensated for those
Right.
hours. Um, in terms of legal tender, being paid for something like that. And
Yeah.
a lot of these people were self employed.
Right. Right.
And so they weren't, I don't want to say allowed to work, but with shutdowns, they were not permitted to operate out of their brick and mortar locations.
Right. Right.
So after a little while, people started really changing their whole attitude.
Right.
I think part of it was they were frustrated with the
Okay.
fact of this new, I don't want to say getting used to the new norm,
Right.
because I totally disagree with that,
Right.
but this event that came up that really derailed a lot of people's lives,
Yeah.
um, financially and psychologically.
Yeah.
And the
They
guidelines
were
that
really
followed.
frustrated.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
I was gonna say, and the guidelines that followed.
The guidelines, all the
Correct.
yeah, the protocol.
Correct.
Yeah.
So they were frustrated, and I think because so young, I was part um, for any guidelines that I wasn't following,
Okay.
because I need to breathe.
Right.
So
So, Mike, let's be specific. This was about people. We'll be honest here. People were getting frustrated because you weren't wearing a mask, or you had decided to start taking it off in certain scenarios.
I did.
That what was? Would you say? 'Cause
Correct.
that was a big part of it.
Correct.
Okay.
I would have, I would be out in the middle of nowhere on a dock or something
Okay.
where there's nobody for several hundred yards.
Right.
And I would have I refer to it as the self-appointed coronavirus task force
Right.
police
Right.
that would drive around and follow me around.
I don't mean to smirk,
And
God, some of this stuff, Mike, I
But
do laugh a little bit because it's just so
it's
outrageous.
true.
Like they're following. Like I can't believe someone is that worked up that they're out following you.
I
And I'm sure you
they
could have.
approached me.
Yeah.
Yep, they approached me and said you are a hot topic of discussion.
Oh, all right. Okay.
So it was one of those things where it was kind of like all the work that I did behind the scenes that was
Right.
positive for helping people.
Yep.
It was
Immediately erased.
the, right. They
Yeah.
didn't care about that
Right.
stuff so much as
Right.
to we gave this person that has been a leader in the community,
Right.
or from what I've been told, a leader in the community. We just filled out 3 citations, so
Right. Right.
we're good there. You know, we checked
Right.
off a few boxes.
Right. And Mike, so here's the
So
next thing I want to move into ask you. When people started complaining, again, if I'm wrong, I don't want to mix any of this story up. It seems to me that the complaints were going to, in other words, the town itself was getting upset, or maybe there were authorities in the town that were taking notice, but also the complaints were being sent to the company you worked for. Am I right by saying that you were getting it on all angles? Or
so so the who knows where the complaints were from?
okay,
I have a feeling that it was actually from somebody who
okay,
was in the self-appointed task
okay,
force,
okay,
that had some sort of vendetta,
right,
um, to follow me around
okay,
constantly
right,
and check a box off.
okay,
And so the citations were actually all filled out incorrectly.
okay,
They said, and I still have them,
yeah,
they said that they were given to me
okay,
via in person, which was incorrect. I
okay,
never received one of these handed to me
okay,
physically,
okay,
even though it was checked off on the citation that it was.
right,
Also, that I was in specific areas at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning,
okay,
which was inaccurate
okay,
because working the hours that I was working, that was not happening.
right,
I was
okay,
100% passed out
okay,
without a
okay,
doubt.
okay.
So there were just so many
Inconsistencies.
item
Yeah,
inconsistencies and items on
right,
the citations that were 100% inaccurate.
right.
So
So, Mike, what happened was, again, I'll let you tell it so I don't mix it up. You pushed back a bit. You fought against this. Am I correct? Th- does that happen? Like, did you have to go to a courthouse? Did you like who were you confronting when you said this isn't true? This did not happen. Like, who did you have to bring this to?
okay, so what I did was I contested these on
Okay,
the citation itself. There
okay,
was some way of contesting it,
okay,
whether it's writing a letter.
okay,
Actually, I believe now that I was thinking about it, I did write a letter, brought it to the courthouse
okay,
because everything was shut down.
okay,
Um, so there was some sort of drop box for contesting these fines, and I followed the protocol.
right,
And also, the delivery company I worked with had something called telematics
okay,
on your physical person as well as in the vehicle.
okay,
So the hour stamps that I was accused of for violating these citations,
right. Wasn't
I
matching up. Yeah,
contested.
right,
Correct.
right,
They were not matched up. They were 100% inaccurate. And when
right,
I presented that,
right.
they wanted to see the evidence of
Yeah,
that, which these appeals were done via Zoom meeting.
okay,
So I had to miss work, um, got jerked around with court dates, and so I had to take time off of work
okay,
to present my case, and then they had to reschedule for whatever reason. So I missed multiple days of work,
okay,
which, full disclosure, I would rather be working
right,
than dealing with this.
right,
So,
right. And
so that's
but Mike, you ultimately you did win though. they canceled it all out, correct? Did they concede to the
I
fact
I
that
have no idea.
okay,
I ended up, to my knowledge,
right.
yes,
Okay.
but I ended up leaving because I
Okay.
saw where I lived unraveling.
Okay.
And a lot of people would disagree with me about it, but
Right.
a lot of my friends are
But
matured, have been out there for
right.
3, 4, 5 generations, and they said a few things that resonated with me.
Yeah.
When the funny people at work stop being funny,
Right.
and when the good people start leaving good jobs,
Right.
and the good people start leaving places that
Right.
they once loved and adored,
Yeah.
you should really take notice of what's going on
No,
around you.
but
So I started seeing that.
right. But Mike, my argument would be this: the fact that you left on your own accord and you weren't driven out of town, or I mean, you could say theoretically, maybe mentally, you were driven out, but I would say you stood up to this, and it was, in a sense, a victory. Just the fact that you left on your own, and you said you're not sure whatever became of the child. Well, even that seems like a victory that they never really came after you further. Like, I guess that's kind of the point of this, is that you did take a stand for yourself, and it did sound like maybe they were kind of like, whoa, we didn't expect this guy to, have records of where he was going to be and this, that, and the other thing. And I got to imagine
Right.
you preparing yourself like that. Because the reason I bring it up, Mike, is because like I said, we talk so much about, there were so many people in this position, and I have my own stories too, like just crazy situations I got myself into. And I think it was, a lot of people were just kind of looking to people like yourself. And like you keep saying, like, I know you're trying not to pat yourself on the back. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back either. But Mike, I'm going to tell you something. This is the one area of the one time in my life I could look around and say I took a stand and nobody was standing with me. Like, I'm proud of that. Like, I did some scary stuff, and I think people just didn't know what to do. They knew something was wrong, but they didn't know how to go about it. And that's why I think it's good that people saw, even though maybe it got lost in the pile or you don't really know what became of it, it's the fact that you did prepare yourself and took this stand. I want to ask you something else too, Mike. And again, we don't have to get into names. We don't have to name people, but we did talk. There was an aspect to this story that I wanted to get into. You did have evidence of people around town, authority figures or what have you, not wearing the mask. Is that correct? Can we say that?
Correct.
Okay, very
Yeah.
solid evidence. We'll leave it at, we can leave it at that, or you can elaborate. It's up to you. You didn't actually have to use it, but you were prepared to use it, correct? If you had to.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that I want to talk about right now. Okay, that's the thing that just sickens me about this whole thing, is that what you witnessed was a micro, kind of a micro version of what was going on in the country. I can go, Mike, I can go down the line. It was almost like, without exception, if you name every humongous figurehead in the country that was really pushing, you got to wear a mask, whether it was Nancy Pelosi, Lori Lightfoot out in Chicago, Illinois, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, is that his name, I think, right? These guys, every single one of them, they all got caught not wearing the mask. They all got caught not doing the thing they were telling you to do. And that I think a lot of people were disgusted by that. Were you going to say something, Brian?
Because that was a test bed for power and authority.
Oh, I have no doubt it was a test run. Absolutely no doubt. And we failed miserably, I think, as a people. But the point I'm making, Mike, is that what you witnessed was not particular to the area you were delivering in. I saw this all around the country. I mean, these were people that were, right down, up the road from us here in Rhode Island, Gina Raimondo. I mean, just terrifying people. If I see you outside gathering with no mask, we're coming there with the state police, and you're going to be in big trouble. And then on 2 different occasions, she was caught without a mask. Now, Mike, I don't know about you. I think that's a big, big deal. If you're threatening people like that and terrifying them and using the state police as your own personal security force, and then you get caught twice without wearing a mask, I mean, I think it's fabulous that you kind of collected this evidence of people not wearing the mask because, again, they're enforcing this. They're enforcing this. The point, I think, Mike, is that I believe the people who were enforcing this, because there were so many examples of them not doing their own rules, it screams to me, and I'd like your opinion on this. It says to me that they were not actually afraid of the thing they were telling you to be afraid of. Like, for them to just take it off like that and think it's no big deal, they're not really buying into this. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, now that you said at the beginning you were like everybody else, you were wrapped in it, but now looking back, what do you make of all that? Do you have any personal opinions of why? Me and Brian just said it was a test run for power. What do you think of the coronavirus? Any thoughts in general about what was behind it, or maybe you think there was nothing behind it? What are your opinions? Have you formulated any opinion after going through this experience?
I think there's a lot of very bad people in this world behind the scenes that
Okay.
pull strings in certain areas. And I find that anytime we see an event that's substantial, it's not to just do one thing, cover one, it's not a one trick pony.
Okay.
It's to cover multiple different avenues
Right.
of eroding freedoms or personal freedoms or anything like that. I don't, things are not what they seem.
Right.
So,
Right.
but I agree 100%. It was a test run as a possibility. It was also it was an election year.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I think there are a lot of variables at
Right.
play, and I don't think any substantial event that we've seen,
Right.
even over the past 100 years,
Nothing has ever been like that. That was major.
is a
Yeah.
one-trick pony. I think it's to cover multiple aspects.
That was
So
one of the biggest, whatever you want to call it, political. Even if, let's say for the sake of argument, let's say it was all justified, whatever, just for the sake of argument, whatever you want to call it, whatever your view, I believe that was the biggest, largest scale, most technical worldwide operation, coordinated.
Technically, by title,
Right.
it was the largest transfer of wealth
Yes.
in human history.
Yes. Whatever, however,
that's a good way to put it.
Right.
100%.
Right. But just
Yeah.
the ability to get everybody on every continent to go along with this, man, that's impressive. You've got some scary people running this world to pull that off. That is, and Mike, I'll tell you this too. Yeah, in Mike, when it first happened, I'm going to tell you where I was at, because I, from the beginning, was like, I don't know about this. And Mike, by the way, my views, and you've probably heard me say this on previous episodes, my views were not formed because of the coronavirus. My views on sickness, illness, germs, how we approach it, were already formed long before this. This was just more of an opportunity for me to express it, I guess. Those ideas, I have no issue with people being afraid of germs. I just thought none of this made sense. Okay, and people can go to the older episodes and see where I stand and all that. But what I was gonna say was I think it it was impressive that I know what I was gonna say. When this first started, Mike, I laughed. When they said, those mask mandates came out, I'm sitting here going, and I feel stupid. I mean, my foot was stuffed in my mouth, because I remember telling people, there is no way they're going to get people to put these masks on. They're not going to get people to put their 2-year-olds in the mask. I thought every night was going to be pages and pages on YouTube of people getting in fights at the grocery stores. That never happened. I was astonished at the obedience. I never saw that coming. I even though I know how people are, we mentioned human behavior earlier. I don't know if it was before we started recording, but we talked about that, observations of human behavior. As someone who's observed human behavior and as someone who is very bleak about what, and I don't expect much from people. I really thought there'd be pushback. Man, was I wrong. People were just going along with it, and that was very surprising to me. But Mike, I want to ask you something. As someone who, you know, again, you had to deal with these citations. You knew people in the town. You were kind of on the blunt end of all this. I have a question for you, and this more pertains to this show. Where I want to move into like kind of the next phase of things. And one thing I want to do, and me and Brian talked about this at the beginning of this, when we first started the show, we still have not done this yet, but I'm wondering your opinion on it. I want to get people on the show as guests who I blatantly disagree with and have a debate. My fear is no matter how much of an olive branch I extend, no matter how much I come in peace and I say, look, I disagree with you. I don't like what your policies are, but I'd like to give you a chance to talk about it, defend yourself. I feel like the guests I have on, if it's a politician I don't care for, whatever, my feeling is no matter what I do to offset it, it's not going to work. I feel like they're just automatically going to have like kind of a confrontational defensive demeanor, right? As someone who went through what you went through and you had people, powerful people in this town kind of watching you and you became this topic, like you said, of conversation, what do you think I'll be met with? Like if as I try to get people on the show, do you think they'll be willing to, I think it's going to be tough just to get them on. And I also think if I can get them on, like I said, they're going to be very almost combative and not willing to meet me in the middle or have a discussion. What are your opinions on this? Just human nature, people who were enforcing this, and it doesn't even have to be the coronavirus. It could be, how do you think people are going to take it? Do you think I'll be able to round people up to come on if I get them on? Any opinion? I know this is kind of off topic type thing, but do you, as someone who kind of went through all this, what do you think I'm in for if I can actually get some of these people on the show?
Well, I really like the idea, and I think that shows a lot of emotional and social maturity on your part,
Okay.
because not there aren't a whole lot of people that want to do something like that.
Probably
I think
not.
it's a great idea. However, I feel that in that particular region where you live, and I don't know if I'm articulating it in the way I want to say it, but
Brian's giving you the thumbs up. Yeah.
it's it's kind of like agree with me or else
Yeah. Yeah.
type
Yeah.
attitude. And I think that they've thought that way for maybe a long time,
Right.
and maybe now they might realize maybe I made a mistake, or
Right.
starting to connect some dots together
Right.
by saying, hang on a second,
Yeah.
we go out to dinner, we have a velvet rope there where we gotta, herd ourselves in like cattle and
Right.
wear a mask going through the velvet rope. But when I'm
Right.
sitting at the table, I have to take it
Right.
off. And now that that's all sunk into
Right. Right.
their squash, if you will,
Right.
they might have a different view on it, but
Right.
they also might be afraid to express that
Yeah.
view because um, of the way their friends or peers might think about them.
Right.
And, you got to be you. You got to not. One of the
Right.
best advice that my parents taught me is don't do what everybody else does.
Right.
Because if you want to be successful, do the exact
Right.
opposite.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
not that people aren't successful, but my parents instilled be a leader, not a
Right.
follower. We got plenty of followers out
Right.
there.
Right.
So
Mike, I have a theory too that I was curious your thoughts on. I believe looking back, and other people brought this up to me, and I was kind of thinking it on my own, but like friends kind of gave me fuel to this. I would not be surprised, especially in Massachusetts where I am. I think there were probably circumstances where some of these people you saw on TV going, wear the mask, we're going to have a shutdown, whether it was a governor, a politician, it could be a police chief, it could be anything. I think there were probably cases where people maybe had things in their past that they didn't want known, and maybe were approached and said, you're going to go along with this, or, you know, this thing that happened in 1989 is going to come back up again.
What do you mean,
Absolutely.
blackmail?
Yeah, blackmail. I also think there's another side to it too. Maybe it wasn't negative. I think, see, there are people here in New England that after the coronavirus, they weren't working here anymore. Now suddenly they had jobs in Washington, D.C., or they're working for these big companies. Was that promised to them at the beginning? Like, hey, you just do this for us and we'll get you, like,
Are you talking about a certain Italian man?
I'm talking about a few people from this area. And it, again, like, it's like, I hate like the term conspiracy theory because I'm not that. But man, at what point can I no longer ignore that the major players in New England that were pushing this on us, the minute it was over, they had these spectacular jobs or these spectacular positions in Washington, D.C. So I want to ask you, have you ever pondered this? Do you think maybe some leaders were coerced or maybe some were promised? Like, was it all just they were on board to get on board or to go with their party? Do you think maybe some of it was wink, 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 just go along with this? Do you have any opinions on that?
I think absolutely 100%. You nailed it. Absolutely.
Okay.
Uh, and also, you notice that there were a lot of CEOs, CFOs that stepped down from position. They disappeared. Who knows where they went? So I think you got your finger on the pulse there. Something's not what it seems.
Right.
You
Well,
know,
it
if you
just
do this, like you said,
Yeah.
we'll.
It just came out that a lot of those doctors got a lot of money for saying like COVID things
Well, yeah, the
and doing COVID things.
right, the hospitals did too. Mike, I know girls, and now I would love, to have one of them on the show. But I think it would definitely, they'd have to be in disguise. But I've had girls that work at the local hospitals tell me straight up with a straight face, they were told just so casually. So their superiors said, just write coronavirus on everything, even if that's not what they died from. So we can get the money.
Correct.
And I, it's,
Same where I lived.
right. And I think that, like, again, if I got some of these people on to discuss, here's the thing, like, I think these people, after what they did to us, I think they need to come on a show like this. And I really think they have a lot to answer for, and they should come on. Like, they have a moral obligation to, now that it's over, tell us what on earth you were thinking when you did this to the people. Mike, I want to ask you another.
I'd like to stop you there for a second, if
okay.
you don't mind.
Yeah.
Hold that question.
You broke up there for a
People
sec.
don't have morals. A lot of.
Mike, start that over again. You
How about
broke
now?
up there. Okay, go ahead.
No, I was saying
Yeah.
where you said they have a moral obligation.
Yeah.
The people that were saying, wear a mask or now they have all these high-paying jobs afterwards.
Right.
A lot of these people don't have morals.
Yeah.
They don't think like normal people.
They don't.
I heard they hunt humans in Maine.
Yeah. Go on, Mike. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, no, you got to eliminate that part, like
Right.
having kindness and compassion for other people.
Right.
They don't have that element.
Right. Right.
That's why they're in a position of running a big company or something
Right.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not that all people that run big companies don't have any morals.
Right. But there is a connection there. There's, Mike, I want to ask you something else, and we're not going to get into where you live or anything like that. But if you don't mind, you did talk to me about you made an interesting comment to me about left-wing states versus right-wing states, or Republican-leaning versus Democrat-leaning states. And I love the way you put it to me, because you started off saying, you know that, like, you can live in like a Republican state or a Southern state or whatever. And the way you said it to me was, it's nothing's perfect. Even the Republican states might have their issues, but in comparison to a left-wing state, you were trying to explain to me, it's like people don't understand. It's almost like living in a completely different country. Do you care to elaborate on any of that? Like, what's the vibe? Like, what would you say is the vibe between the two two different like a left wing state versus a right wing state?
Okay, so I lived in Mass for most of my entire life, 34 years.
Right. Okay.
So I lived in a small country town, pretty conservative. I mean, we don't have a traffic light or anything
Right.
like that. We have one blinking light,
I
but
grew up in one of those towns too.
yeah, I
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
you saying that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so in 21, I went on a vacation, right?
Okay.
2021.
Yeah.
And I visited another state that happens to be more of a right conservative state,
Okay.
and complete strangers
Yeah.
were not much nicer to me
Okay.
than people I've known for over a decade.
Okay.
That just blew me away.
Yeah.
The Southern hospitality that I experienced was unreal, and I'll
Okay.
never forget it. It's one of
Right.
those things that will resonate with me forever, because, and still it goes on today, where complete strangers will have a conversation with you as a normal person, as opposed to people I delivered to for 12 years or more that wouldn't even say hello
Right.
anymore.
Right. Right.
Um,
Y-
so,
You know something funny, Mike? My cousin, he actually people in the area know him. He has a podcast too, believe it or not. He spent some time in the South, and the thing he used to always say to me, the thing he noticed between down there and up here is, I remember him telling me this like 20 years ago. He's like, dude, it's so weird. Like, people on the roads are like respectable. Like, you'll come to like a stop sign and like someone will let you go. They don't drive like 2 inches behind you. Like, there was that much of a difference in the way people drove down south versus up here. He's like, I come back up here, man. People are flying. They're angry. They're in a hurry. You're slowing everybody down. So even just the way people drove their vehicles, like even just that, the demeanor, he noticed this like huge difference in like just the courtesy on the road, you know. So I when you talk about like people saying hello to each other and being courteous to each other, yeah, I think Mike, I think in Massachusetts, unfortunately, we've almost, people are proud of it up here, and I think it's very unfortunate. You know, you lived up here. There's bumper stickers, T-shirts, where people are proud of this, right? And you know, I ask people like, how long does this roof hold up for? Where it's this place where
It's
people
a
are,
roof, yeah. It's a bubble. It's
right?
actually
It's
an
a
overarching
bubble,
problem. The hospital, the profit incentives,
right?
the attitude,
Right.
being in a rush all the time.
Right.
It's the big C. It's the
Right.
capitalism.
Right. And then the result of that, people just being nasty and rude to each other, people around here, they really are proud of it. I mean, you see these Dunkin' Donut commercials where the people are talking like they just climbed out of a trash can, and people love it. And I'm like, dude, at what point is it like, why are you proud of the fact that you're rude to people or you're getting in fights out on the road and stuff like that? So I know I'm
You're
kind of
costing somebody money
right.
and time.
Right. So I know I'm veering off a little bit here, Mike, but like, yeah, I'm just more commenting on like what you're saying. Yeah, there's a different demeanor, people a little more courteous and stuff like that. And obviously you noticed that. What about politics? Did you notice a big difference in the politics, or were people a little more protective of their freedom, or what do you think?
I think some of the things that we talked about, like
Yeah.
in this particular podcast,
Yeah.
like when you said, "Do you have an opinion on whether or not these politicians, governors, or what have you,
Yeah.
were promised something if they followed along with this dialogue?"
Right.
Okay, well, um, up there, if I would speak with somebody about that, um, in mass,
Yeah.
they would look at me like I'm absolutely crazy.
Right.
However, where I live, between the ages of 18 and some of the people, my best friends, are in their 80s and 90s,
Right.
they understand that.
Right.
And if I mentioned that where I lived, I was crazy. I
Yeah.
was one of those
Ostracized.
people,
Yeah. Yeah.
end
Yeah.
quote. Right.
Like,
I'm one of those.
I,
So.
As someone who's no longer here but knows the area, do you think, like, I don't know, I hear this all the time that there are these pockets of people rebelling and trying to take a stand, even here in Massachusetts. And by the way, Mike, the audience knows this about me. Dude, I'm not, if I have to say this again and again, because people still don't get it, I'm not rooting for anyone's side. It sounds like I'm beating up on Democrats or I'm saying vote Republican. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just rebelling against what the authority is in this state. Having said that, do you think, I mean, is there any hope for us that are still up here? Do you think people are getting wise, or they might start maybe questioning this leadership that we've had for the last at least 50 years in this state? Same old, same old. Or do you think we're just stuck? It's all, Massachusetts is always going to be Massachusetts. Do you have any? And I don't care how depressed. You can be honest with me. I've already accepted it. So what do you think of that?
Don't get me wrong. I lived there 34 years,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of Mass has some really spectacular things, that you're not going to find in other places.
Yeah.
Some of the scenery is just absolutely phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
Where I used to live, the some of the ponds, you'd go canoeing and right out to the middle, and you could look down 30 feet. You could see the turtles swimming.
Yeah.
I mean, those are things I'll never forget.
Right.
Part of my childhood.
Yeah.
There's just certain things like every state has its problems, like
Right.
we were discussing
Yeah.
that. It doesn't matter where you go, and that's why it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right?
Right.
So it's just certain things like having a toll, right?
Right.
You have a toll that's set up. Well, after everything's paid for, take the toll down.
I,
Like
Mike,
the
it's
toll
so
where I live is $1.50.
right.
And if I traveled through New Jersey, it was $56.
Right. You know something
Where I
funny?
live, it's $1.50.
I was thinking about this today because I had to go to New Hampshire.
And our roads, and where that in New Jersey, those roads weren't very good. And where I live, they're much nicer.
I had to go.
It's like night and day.
I had to go to New Hampshire the other day, and I was thinking about tolls. I'm like, and I think about this every time I leave the state. I'm like, you've got property tax, income tax, sales tax, every tax.
And to go up to Portland, I need $6 and change.
Right. What is not being covered that all these other taxes? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, after paying all these other taxes, like you said,
It's
still
capitalism. It cares only for profit.
But
It literally runs on what's
you
the
still-
profit? How do I get the profit? How do I get more profit? Oh, yeah, I can screw people
But
out of
I
money
guess,
like that.
I can't believe, though. I guess my point is, again, when does it collapse? When do people finally say, "Why am I still?"
We're about to see it.
Mike, I got another one for you.
Well,
go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
I just want to comment on. I want to comment on that. All tax is theft.
Yeah.
And we need to go back to sound money that is backed by something that's physical.
Yeah.
Coming off the gold standard in 71 was a huge mistake, and everything revolves around sound money, sound currency. So one of the things that I see in some of the area that I work in is the quality of parts, for example, auto parts and things like that. People talk about how cars used to be steel. Well, you also used to have sound money.
Right.
So now that you don't have sound money, they have to come up with alternative materials to build parts that are cheap and maximize profit. So I would like to say it's capitalism is, and free enterprise is a good thing. However, when you have sound money, that's when it works.
Right.
When you have something that's backed up a petrodollar, it doesn't work. You're borrowing this currency and paying interest on it.
And they can also print it out of nowhere.
Not to mention printing it.
Yeah. Mike, I'm just curious. I have to ask. I'm a huge Ron Paul fan. I've always liked him. I still do to this day. Is he an influence at all in your book? Because you're talking a little like him right now. Are you into Ron Paul? Have you ever followed him, or because he's a huge influence on me?
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I follow him.
Yeah.
Anytime that he spoke, he always um, it's some of the things are common sense. It's
Yeah.
just we got to go back to the old way.
Yeah.
A lot of the old timers I hang out with talk about the old times when,
Right.
in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, when music was good, people were honest, and cars were cool.
Right.
So,
My
got to
guy.
go back to that.
I have I recently heard in the last year or so, I heard a story that like blew, just to show you how much the world has changed. I had he's my great uncle. He used to buy houses, fix them up, and then sell them. That whole routine. He did it all the time. Some of my family members who worked for him were telling me this was back in like the late 70s, mid 70s maybe. I would say probably mid because it was before I was born. He I guess they were driving to a job somewhere, and he saw this house that he wanted, and he dropped, my family members off that were working. I don't know if it was landscaping or something like that, paving driveways. He said, wait here, I'm going back to that house. He went back. He went up to the guy. The real estate guy happened to be in the yard. He pulled $50 out of his pocket. He gave him $50. Hey, here's $50. Can I have the house? Here's a down payment. And they shook hands. And that was it. The house was hit. The deal was made. There was a $50 down payment in cash, shook hands. Can you imagine that happening today? The house was his, $50 and a handshake. And
Yep.
if you think about it, Mike, in my opinion, I mean, the 70s, this is an ancient history. Like the 70s,
Right.
in comparison to what's happening now, was not that long ago. Like for it to change that drastically since the 70s, that's kind of scary because I feel like the world's changing very, very fast, and it just like what you were saying back when this was different. Yeah. Back when you could give someone $50 and shake their hand and that house was yours, all that red tape was gone. And that we can't even fathom that now, so.
I will say that recently I joined this business group that I absolutely was probably one of the best things that happened in my life, one of the best decisions I've ever made. And the people that are in this business group, I'm not going to say what it is, but it's they're all old school like that.
Yeah.
Follow through, say what they mean what they say.
Yeah.
If they're going to show up, they show up. If they're going to be a few minutes late, they let you know in advance. And there's accountability within the group.
Right.
So there is, and these chapters are all over the US and all over the world.
Yeah.
So I don't want the podcast to be all negative, and I'm not saying that it is,
Yeah.
but I think people are turning around. I think they realize that we got to go. Things got to change. We got to go back to that old school, and it's not even that old school. It's just having the systematic morals are being removed from society. The fabric of society is getting eroded.
Right.
We have to go back to that sitting at the table where everything's a distraction.
Right.
People are acting tyrannical, and we have documents saying that if they act up, we need to do something.
Yeah, yeah. Mike, I really believe, actually, I probably shouldn't even say this, like jinx myself, but like, it's scary, kind of what Brian was just talking about. I just saw I was telling Brian before we started, the activist group Students for Life, they found out that they were on a terrorist watch list for going around to colleges and having discussions about abortion, just asking the students what they thought. They were next to like violent terrorist groups. Now,
pro-life is on that list.
Absolutely. And lucky for them, I guess from what I was told, I just started reading about it, their lawyers got in touch with Homeland Security or whatever it was. They were taken off the list. And they successfully got themselves, they said they were quietly taken off the list. But, why are you on this list in the first place? Like, that's really scary to me that just for
Who
having it.
makes the list is
Right.
more scary.
Yeah. So I mean, you
The
know,
IMF,
yeah, they're not.
WEF,
Yeah, they're not a weaponized organization, but yet they're on this list.
World Bank.
Yeah. So, Mike, I want to ask you before we wrap it up, because you've got a lot of opinions, and we've talked a lot, not just today, but on any other things.
If you got more time, it's totally not a bad thing either.
Yeah, we're chilling right now. So I want to give you the floor. You got the audience here. You've listened to the show. Anything you want our audience to know? Opinions you have, things that you think we're leaving out, that like anything you want people to know, like ideas or something you think people should know that can like help our quest to try to change this world. Any opinions or advice like you might want to help us with?
Well, I think so where I grew up, my father owns a auto salvage,
Yeah.
right? So I was constantly going out and sourcing parts and pulling parts off.
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring this up, and people don't think of it as maybe an issue,
Yeah.
but for somebody who works with parts and things like that with vehicles, counterfeit parts is a big deal.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is like there are various spark plugs um, that are of a good quality.
Yeah.
That now we have other companies or other countries that are making knockoff fake versions of it,
Right.
and it's a problem because it's advertised
Yeah.
through some of the popular websites
Yeah.
for ordering items.
Yeah.
It's a problem because people have no idea,
Right.
and it creates an issue with their vehicle or something like that.
Yeah.
And we got to start building things here
Right.
with and I'm not saying it's got to be over regulated.
Right.
We've got enough rules and regulations,
Right.
but if it's made here or if it's supposed to be made in Japan or something like that, it's got to be made there. And
Right.
one of the things when I get customers that come to me for certain items, I say you really need to know what you're looking for before you know what you're looking for.
Right.
Especially on these popular websites where you can buy pretty much anything from.
Right. And I don't think it's limited to just automobiles. What you're saying, I'm guessing
Absolutely
this
not.
could go for
No,
appliances.
absolutely not.
Yeah. Right.
Pharmaceuticals. Please don't buy
Right.
pharmaceuticals on the internet.
Yeah. Don't buy pharmaceuticals on the internet. I don't buy pharmaceuticals at all. I'll leave it at that.
Appliances.
Yeah. Oh, Mike, actually, I got one for you before we wrap it up. Do you have any? So let me ask you this. This is how I guess the last kind of area I want to get into that you and me talked about. We've talked a lot. It always comes up with these coronavirus conversations. You know, I've said on this show, there are people who I love very much that really, you know, I know things I said and I did probably made them very uncomfortable. I also noticed there are people who were viciously against what I was saying that have now actually come around and apologized to me. Okay. Do you have, I know you talked about with your customers, okay, but outside of that, like friends, family members, was there any, once you kind of came around and you were like, okay, this is what I think, I'm not so sure about this, were there any damaged friendships or anything like, because I've been lucky enough, I've salvaged a lot of it, but did you have any, or maybe like, because Brian brought up pharmaceuticals, what about the vaccine? Any opinions on that, or like people getting angry about vaccines? And Matt, did you get it? Maybe you got it, maybe you didn't. Anything like that you care to talk about? Like the daily interactions, how you navigated through all that once you had these opinions? Because I had a rough time, and I think most people did who weren't kind of going
Correct.
along with it. You know,
I did have a rough time with that. I had people coming up saying, "I got vaccinated. Did you get vaccinated? You should be. You should be doing this." And it was, I did not, because anytime your government says you should be doing this, you should run in the other direction.
Right.
So, but in terms of damaged relationships, I've tried to reach out to many, a solid 90% of my friends where I used to live, for 3 years.
Yeah.
via text message, phone, voicemail,
Yeah.
email, their work, wherever they work, sending an email through their contacts on
Yeah.
their website for their business. Nothing,
Okay.
absolutely nothing. So when I preface the whole podcast by saying I really learned who my friends are,
Right. Right.
I still chat with a handful, and some of those friends actually came to visit me.
Right. Okay.
So, where I live now. Um, so, yes, as far as I'm concerned, there are friendships that were damaged,
Right.
and some of them are really surprising.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
And just to add, in case the audience forgot, these are people that I were friends with,
Yeah.
went out to dinner with,
Yeah.
saw their kids grow up,
Yeah.
hung out with them on the weekends, when I had free time. Um, Breakfast, lunch, and dinner
Right.
sometimes on the weekends, or pancake breakfast on
Right.
Sundays.
Right.
This was an extended family. This
Right.
wasn't just somebody on the street.
Right.
That's the part that's been really a very jagged pill to swallow.
Right. Mike, you know what got me through a lot of it? I kept reminding myself, right, that there was a mission that, powerful people were in on, and they used every tool at their disposal, the television, the you name it, the internet, and they wanted people to think a certain way, and they're very successful, as we talked about. They shut the whole world down. The thing I kept reminding myself is that these people I love, there was an attack on their brains, and the attack was well planned out, and it was successful. And I almost kept reminding myself, I'm like, Dan, you can't get mad at them. Somebody put a lot of time into making sure they were going to think this way, and you have to have sympathy for them. You have to, because Mike, I remember, this is the way I would put it to people. I would have certain people in my life, and I would talk to them, and we might talk maybe for an hour or so. And when the conversation was over, they were kind of like, wow, Dan's making sense. You're right. But then I would leave, and it took that television 10 minutes. All they had to do was tune into the 5 o'clock news. And in 10 minutes, that entire conversation I had with them was erased. Or let's look at it this way. Let's say it wasn't 10 minutes. Let's look at it the flip way. I talked to them for an hour a day. The other 23 hours of the day, they are getting batted with the other side. So what? It's like I'm a little, like Elton John said, candle in the wind. I'm a little flame in Niagara Falls trying to fight this thing. You know what I mean? And yeah, people have come back to me and said, gee, I get what you're saying now. But I've told them, I go, listen, man. They go, next time this happens, I go, dude, look, what you just saw.
You had the opportunity.
The next time could be 100 years from now. It might be too late.
The next time isn't going to be the same thing. If you continue, my opinion on it is we're currently at war.
Right.
It's a psychological, social work, all those values, and dumbing down. Everything's a distraction. This business group that I'm in, they get, I don't want to say they get upset with me, but I have like my Archie Bunkerisms, and I'll say, why can't we just do this normal?
Right.
Why is everything got to be a login and a password? And, and
I've said the
I
same.
write my appointments down on a note on a notebook.
Yep.
If the internet goes down, I'm good.
Yeah.
So, it's there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Right, Mike. You
gotta go back.
Right. Do you think, Mike? Do you feel that? See, I think. Well, first of all, let me just finish that last thought. The next time is going to be something totally different. That's going to take people off guard again. So when people are like the next time, but the next. See, Mike, I knew for years. I was always into this stuff. I knew something like this one day was going to happen.
I got to interject, if you don't mind me saying, because now I just got 10% left on the
Okay, we'll
on the
wrap it up in
phone
a
here.
minute. Yeah.
It's going to drop off probably
Okay.
down to 0 in just a minute.
Okay,
So,
so let's wrap it
I
up
mean, I
then.
got no problem plugging
Yeah.
it in and doing
Yeah,
that.
let's see
So,
if it dies and then if we have to edit. So I'll wrap it up, Mike. The next time, it's always going to be something that's going to be very believable that people are not going to expect. Here's my last thing, Mike, and you just say it quick. Do you think that this extended outside of the coronavirus? Like, have you ever seen situations where maybe it had nothing to do with the coronavirus? It was just a political belief that might have caused an unrelated political belief that might have caused friction with friends or family? Or was it always just coronavirus?
I think people realized that I was a little bit more conservative and just kind of have that. I don't know if I think it was a combination of how I was raised
Yeah.
and like my parents would say, we have enough followers. You're
Okay.
either a leader or a follower.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think where I lived, people were afraid to be who they were,
Right.
and they would try to pretend to be somebody else
Right.
because it was the trend
Right.
for the area.
Right.
And
Not for everybody.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the way they were told to act was made in a think tank.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of time was put into it. Well, Mike, let's wrap this up since the phone's dying. Mike, thank you so much. I'm glad this finally happened. I'd love to have you on again. Stay on so we can say bye to you. And just again, Mike, thank you so much. This was great today. And I think it's great how you stood up for yourself. And I do hope today inspires people. That's kind of my goal, that you can fight City Hall. And, I know maybe your victory was vague, but I do think it was a victory regardless. That's my opinion.
Well, I appreciate that, and thanks for having me on. And absolutely, I'd love to come on.
Awesome.
Come on again if the opportunity arises.
Awesome, definitely. Thank you very much, Mike, and thanks everyone. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for tuning in. And we'll get thanks to our first year with the show. This was great. Yeah, almost. We're almost there. We might squeeze in another episode, but again, thanks to everyone who's been listening. That's all we got for today.